Hey, I'm here with Jesse Johnson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Terrell.
Pretty good.
Good
I'm
to meet
Terrell,
you.
Big Gold Belt Media. I'm here to ask you all the tough questions about this movie that I've just watched. Quite an amazing film that this was because I didn't know what to expect. And we're here to talk about Boudica, Queen of War. So many questions. First question is how did this get to you? Like how did this particular script, like how did you get involved in this project as far as the directing this particular movie?
I'll try and keep it quick. I've been giving really long answers. I apologize, Terrell. When I was a little boy, my mother took me to see the statue, which is next to Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament, right in the middle of the power mongering of London. You know, it gives you an idea of how much esteem they place her in. Anyway, so we saw this statue, and it was of a mother with her two daughters in a chariot. And my mother was a single mum. She's a fiery redhead and felt a great affinity for this woman who was protecting her children, which is what my mother felt she was doing with me. And so the seeds of interest in this character started very young. And I've researched her ever since, and I always found her enormously interesting. I knew there was a film there. I just knew it in my soul. And I'd written the first half of the script. I just didn't know how to lick this act of atrocity, this awful atrocity, this evil act that happens midway through. And I didn't know how to film it. There's no way of putting a camera on it in a way that I wanted to see, that I wanted to be a part of. Every single movie, TV show, documentary, play, book that tried to deal with that couldn't handle it, didn't do it. It's where they fell apart. It's why we haven't heard this story more than we have. It's you can't make movies about certain subject matter. That is one of them. It just doesn't lend itself. And then I worked with Olga Kurylenko. I realized I had an ace in the hand, someone that I loved working with, someone that could be Boudica, that represented that, that character, that powerful female, and she could play both parts, both sides of the coin, so to speak. So I came, over, somehow that triggered whatever it was in my brain to come up with a way to solve that problem, which was manifesting of a fantasy. I'd read a little about these mothers in Vietnam who had seen such evil, such atrocity that they had, psychosomatically developed a blindness. They couldn't see because, and doctors found nothing wrong with them. And for me, that felt like the way to handle this, to not show the audience, but let them know as the character finds out what has happened. I felt that was the most organic and gentle and dramatic way to do it. And so
Oh,
the script came together, after 20 years.
well, I mean, this is the time. This is definitely the perfect time. Just like you said, seeing this come together, I went into this movie completely blind, no idea what it was. I was like, I'm thinking I'm gonna get it, like, of course, like a history lesson here, like, of course, like what was going on, but I didn't expect it to be as crazy as it was and as brutal as it was. I think like, okay, maybe we're gonna just do like a, maybe some off scenes where they just kind of talk about it, but you guys go all in. In terms of like directing these fight scenes, which are, like I said, super brutal. What was kind of like your style, like something that you wanted to definitely have shown, or have it presented a certain way during
I'll
these
tell you
scenes?
what, I did a lot of reading on on fighting. I've made a lot of action movies over the years, and what I didn't want was the 1950s clanking swords and then under the
Right.
arm, and the other guy goes, "Ah, I'm dead." I know. I've studied weapons in history. To kill a person with a sword, by the time you've had one sword fight, that edge is blunt. So you've got a blunt piece of metal that weighs about 5 or 6 pounds, and you've got to kill another human being with it. It's not going to be pretty, baby. It's not going to leave a clean wound and he's going to fall back. You're going to wound him before you kill him. And it's going to take 50, 60 swings sometimes to kill a person. You're not going to kill him on the first one. And I wanted to give a little bit of that to the audience that, I couldn't do it exactly, but I wanted to show it's difficult, it's messy, it's nasty, it's not pretty, it's not Saturday morning television. And I felt that was the honorable thing to do. What I didn't realize, it was going to be about 55 gallons of fake blood, which is really expensive nowadays, but it
Oh,
was a lot. It was a lot. It was quite an incredible experience. I got to tell you, it was doing all those fights. But I brought together some great guys. I had Luke Lafontaine and Dan Stiles who worked with me on Avengement. The two of them. Luke has worked with me many times in the US. Did the Debt Collectors movies with me, Savage Dog, and Dan has worked with me England on Avengement and One Ranger. So there were guys that I knew when they got together. They fight like crazy and they argue all the time. But out of that, you get great choreography, great sequences. And so I worked with them. They would, I'd describe what I want. They put it together, show me videotape. I'd describe how we shot it. And then we, on the day, it was very rehearsed. It was ready to go. Everyone knew what was expected of them. And we went out there and did it. So it was, there's not really any other way of putting fights together. You have to be quite careful or people get hurt, But they were great guys. They all committed. I think we had a few sprained ankles and some hurt feelings, but it was a very safe movie, which is
you were talking. You were saying as far as like finding a lead, somebody that could play the dual roles, because I mean, your lead. I want to make sure I get her name right because I was trying to pronounce it.
Kurylenko.
Yes, I'm gonna try to pronounce. She's able to embody both of those roles. Like it's almost like two different people playing it. She goes from like this nurturing mom to like this like warrior, like and which feels like it's in a day from my perspective of watching this. That's kind of one of the things I kind of had to get over was like it seemed like it was too like because the explanation of time isn't really there. But
no,
it seemed like
you don't know how much time has passed other than the scar has healed and a few other little giveaways.
Right. I was like, so I'm like, oh man, she could fight really good all of a sudden. Like, oh, last week she could barely swing the sword. But once you get to that point, you see the evolution of like how everything goes. I love me a good revenge story. I love seeing like how this goes and how far you're willing to go for it and how much are you willing to lose.
I wish I could have touched on what she really did, man. She killed, I think, about 50,000 Roman collaborators and Romans. That was, at the time, 3 or 4 cities and anyone else she met along the path along the way. Her army was over 250,000 by the end of it. It was the first time that the English had been brought together. She literally was the first person that brought all of these tribes, the Iceni, the Briganti, the Trinovanti. She brought them together for the very first time, which is why the Victorians loved it, because the Victorians used it as a propaganda, because of Queen Victoria. They wanted to show that, there'd been a powerful woman in the past because, the Victorian men were a little sexist about such things.
Oh, for sure, yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you too is like there seems to be like an element, and I don't think this is a spoiler or anything, but there seems to be like an element of like of magic to the movie.
Yeah. Well, that's important because for me, if you study Celtic history and everything about it is imbued in the earth and the moon and the sun. It was pre-Christian. It was, that everything they did had an element of magic to it. They believed very, very heavily in all of that. And what we touch on it just very delicately, which is what I wanted. We're human, whether it's 10,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, in this case, 2,000 years ago. And humans we'll take anything. If we're told it's normal, it's normal. Right. If a caveman got on a tube train that was traveling and there's a bunch of people on cell phones and he stopped and looked at them all, he saw people that basically looked like him and they're all talking on phones and something, he wouldn't scream and shout. He'd hold on the thing for a little while, look at everyone and realize no one else was screaming or shouting. He'd go, oh, well, I guess it's okay if everyone else is going along with it. And I wanted to show that we as a race, we're pretty scared. We don't want to be the odd man out,
Right.
If everyone is saying this is okay, most humans are going to go, yeah, well, that's okay, I guess this is what happens. And so when these slightly magical events happen, the followers, at the end of the day, they're all getting very rich because they're getting gold, Roman gold by following her and fighting with it. But they're also getting the chance to get revenge for all of this, bad stuff that the Romans have been doing to them, stealing their land, taking high taxes, stealing their children and wives in many cases. So they're getting a chance to get retribution by following her, but they're also getting rich. So if she has a couple of weird kind of idiosyncrasies where she thinks things are going on, you're going to let it go. It's okay. And I wanted to show that element to it because I find that interesting as people. As a species, we're very malleable. We're okay. We'll accept almost any scenario as long as we're comfortable and okay.
It may take a time or two, but eventually you get used to it.
Yeah. You take a small kid and you give him a cell phone and say this is okay. The small kid will go, that's fine. She has no idea how it works, but they'll take it and they'll accept it because everyone they know is accepting it. And this is the same with magic. And if I told the child what's happening in the phone is actually magic, believe it, the child will say, well, I believe in magic now, because there's no other explanation for it. And that's what I wanted to show in the movie. And I think it's fair enough. And I love the fact that you were not quite sure and you asked the way you did, because that proves the fact.
Yeah, I had to go back and say, I'm like, did I just see that, or am I losing it? I'm like, oh wait, no, everybody else acknowledged it, so it actually
Yeah,
happened. I'm like, okay, and then because like
exactly.
there's a certain scene that's they don't, yeah, because it's a scene like they explain it like you just like, oh, okay, and then they go back later in the movie and then it kind of just like, oh, okay, which what we already thought was happening this entire time, which makes that
Yeah.
entire scenario just even sadder than what it was. I'm like, oh, that.
Awful. Yeah. Did you find that moment sad when she discovers?
Yeah, but I was like, I knew, it's like I kind of knew, but they never acknowledge it at the beginning of it. But then I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that makes way more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
that
it's a tough, it's an interesting thing. Because you make a movie and you're editing it, you've seen it so many times. I haven't watched the trailer to this film. It's so personal to me and so raw. I can't see it. I've shared it on my social media. I've literally not watched it yet, because this film it's I've never made a film that I felt so connected to. And I don't know if I should say this in an interview, to tell you the truth, because it probably sounds a bit goofy, but it's literally the first time after 30 odd films that I've done something that has such a heavy part of me in it that I can't even stand to look at it in case it hasn't been represented correctly in the trailer. It's a very strange thing. But yes, yeah,
I can understand that it doesn't feel like work to you. It feels just like you said, as a personal, like something that
exactly,
you put a
exactly.
little bit more your soul into it, so
Yeah,
it's a little bit more personal. So I definitely feel that.
exactly, exactly,
Um,
exactly.
I
Absolutely precious.
I guess what's the strategy here as far as like because I'm not sure how it's been marketed, like as far as like this like going to be stateside or if this is going to be like a
Well, we're very lucky. We got picked up by a great distributor, in the US. We're putting it out in 15 theaters from the 27th of this
okay.
month onwards. So across the country, it will be in theaters. If you get a chance, see it, because it's really, really a wonderful experience on the big screen. Simultaneously, it's going to various streaming outlets. So I'll put them on my social media when they come up. I don't think it's Netflix, but it's all the other ones, Amazon and Hulu and Apple and all that.
Yeah.
And then in the UK, it comes out on the 30th, and it's being released by Signature, and that will be all of the major streaming venues there as well. And Signature are very good; they're really pushing hard for their for the publicity there as well. So it's really brilliant with the little engine that could. It's achieved great stuff. And through this one, I've had financing put forward for another historical epic, which is one that I had on the burner from even before this one, which is one that I can't talk about other than to say that a king dies and leaves England with no king. But there are three contenders, and baby, they have to scrap it out, and it is violent.
Like I
Two
said,
course of about 2 weeks.
oh, I gotta say,
And,
I'm not usually a fan of like any like biopics or history pics because I hate knowing where the ending goes. Like when I'm watching it, so I'm expecting in my head like, oh, this person's gonna die or something's gonna happen. It
the
kind
key
of
the key is to wrap the audience so much in the story that you're telling, they forget that they
right,
know the end.
right. That's
Well,
what I was about to say.
interesting thing about the other one is that it's the year it's set is the year that the Viking era ends. If you ever look at the Viking era in history, it says, like 500 AD through to 1066, and that's the end of it. And it ended for a reason, because they were all wiped out on the beaches of Europe. But we'll move on back to Boudica. And yes, no, so it's been an exciting story for me, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. So something, did you ask a question there somewhere? It's a bit,
Yeah.
I'm a bit
No, I was just saying about like, yeah, my love for like for these movies. Like I said, I mean, just watching this, like this probably the first one of the movies that I actually got into. Like you said, I lost myself in the movie that I completely forgot. And I mean, it was a character that I already didn't know anything about, but just knowing, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. This was pretty good.
Thank you so much, man.
I don't really have much to say. Other
That's
than
great.
like,
No, that means the world to me. I got to tell you, we had a hell of a time financing. I was taking it all around the place. Everyone wanted it. Everyone wanted me. Everyone wanted Olga, and they liked the story. But every American financer we took it to wanted a happy ending. And you're like, one of them actually wrote me an email back, said, "Love you, love the script, but she dies?" Question mark. And it's, oh no, she loses. And it's like, no, she doesn't. No, she doesn't lose. You're missing the point. This is, you know. And so it was an interesting thing to get done. And I finally found Ehud Bleiberg and his son Ariel, who are history buffs, and they just love the whole idea of taking this story. I think maybe because of their heritage, you know, there's an element of they're Israeli, and there's a feeling of battling against everyone around you that comes to the front when you make it, you know, which they perhaps saw with Olga, and other people have asked me, did you hire Olga because she's Ukrainian, because of what's going on there? Right. And the truth for me is, no, it's just a wonderful story. You know, I think it's just really, really interesting. But the crazy thing was, the wonderful sword she had that was custom made, that ended up coming from the Ukraine as well. When I'd ordered it, it said New York, and then I got a message saying, no, actually, we make them in Ukraine, but we have to put New York on the ads, otherwise no one will buy them. And it was they caught at some substation for like 2 months. It's really, really nerve-wracking. It arrived 2 days before we started filming. But our lead actress and our lead sword were both from the Ukraine, which is interesting. By the way, there was no English language when this film was set. They would have spoken all different languages. There would have been no English in the way that we speak in Britain. So, because there's few people have said, how could you possibly have a non-English person playing Boudica? It's like, if Boudica walked in the room, you wouldn't understand the things she said. They didn't speak what we think of as, you know, the Germanic Saxon English, you know, which is based on a bunch of invaders who came a few years, you know, another few hundred years later.
I was definitely about to ask you about that, but you answered that right there. So that answered my final question. Well, look, Jesse, I appreciate you doing this interview with me today. Thank you for the time so much. You know, this is a great movie. I hope everybody gets to see it. Hope they put this on Blu-ray 4K so I can watch it again and watch it with my.
I love your enthusiasm, Phil. I could talk to you for another hour, mate.
Yeah, like I said, I appreciate you. Thank you again for doing this, and I hope we can do this again.
Thank you, brother. All the very best. Thank you for having me.